All right, Cal, we've got a brand new segment for you on Gettable this week. It's time for Spin the Magnets. Thoughts?
You picked it.
I liked it. I quite liked it.
So Spin the Magnets is our segment where we're going to go into a closer look in how clubs have got to this point of their build. Either they're starting the build, they might be midway through it, they might be closer to the top, somewhere in the premiership clock. But we're going to go about how they've dissected their own list and drafted and traded and picked up their free agents to get to this point of where they are and what they need to do next as well. So given Collingwood is the red-hot premiership favourite right now and they're playing some sensational footy, wanted to have a closer look at how they've done it, because if you actually dig a little bit deeper into Collingwood's build, there's different layers to how this has come about and how they're playing the most attractive footy in the competition, because those two things go hand in hand, the recruiting and the teamwork that becomes a part of the list management side of things and how that actually displays itself on the MCG on a Saturday afternoon. What do you think they've done?
Well, they're an interesting case study in the sense that 2020, and there was the supposed fire sale that happened at the Magpies after they made the grand final in 2018. I don't think anyone could have foreseen within 24 months they'd be playing in a prelim, and within another couple of months beyond that they'd be premiership favourites. So what they've done's really interesting in the sense that they've built from a solid foundation. They haven't gone out and done like what Hawthorn's doing now in the sense of completely bottoming out. So they've still got on their list at the moment 10 of the 22 that played in that 2018 grand final. If you're playing off in a grand final, that means you've got a guarantee of 10 players, so almost half the side are good players that have proven they can reach that platform before. Then beyond that, they've since brought in the last 3 years since that supposed fire sale where everything was going wrong at Collingwood, they need to get all these players off their books. They've brought in 27 players, 22 of them are still on their list, and they've let go of 30 players. Of those 30 players that have gone out of Collingwood, there's only 7 on a list elsewhere, which I find really interesting. The fact that not many of the players that they've let go of have been retained by other AFL clubs. So that's a really interesting element of it. Now, I think that as the old adage goes, you trade for needs, you draft for talent. So I went back and looked through over the last couple of days just how many players Collingwood had traded in over the last 3 years and how many blue chip draft prospects they'd brought in. So I'm talking first round draft picks.
I'm talking first
round draft picks. They've brought in 4 first round draft picks in the last 3 years and they've traded for 6 different players. So I reckon if you can combine that, that's 10 players that I think fill a genuine need for them at the moment on top of the 10 they already had from the 2018 draft. Now, just going through it in terms of what other clubs have done from that sense, in the last 3 years, there have only been 3 clubs that have brought in more first-round draft picks and more traded players than Collingwood. They're North Melbourne, who have got 12, Essendon, who have got 11, and GWS, who have got 11.
Interesting.
So all 3 of those sides finished bottom 10. They didn't make finals in 2020, whereas Collingwood was the only one amongst that group that actually made the finals. Collingwood had the added benefit, whereas 5 years ago in 2018, North Melbourne, Essendon and the Giants weren't, well, Giants maybe in a different sense, but they've had to let go of a lot of players, but weren't in a position where they were ready to challenge, whereas Collingwood were. So I just think Collingwood have managed to never bottom out. They've managed to supplement a list that already had legs in it, already had life in it from 2018, and they've managed to bring in a lot of players on top of that fill needs, roles, and bring in talent from a draft perspective as well. Now, you have to preface this conversation, I think, by the fact that they have got a little bit fortunate in the sense that, as you wrote about earlier this week on afl.com.au, they could have 2 All-Australians in Nick and Josh Dacos who are father-sons. Their captain is a father-son in Darcy Moore. They got Isaac Quainer as a top 10 pick as part of their NGA system. So they've got fortunate from that sense, but I don't think you can win a premiership without having a little bit of fortune along the way.
Yeah, you need luck. You need a little bit of luck, but also you have to say, where's the luck and where's the plan? Because I think Collingwood's underrated in terms of its ability to genuinely compete for a premiership over the past 2 decades. So they've only won 1 flag this century. It's very hard to win a premiership.
Yeah.
You do need a lot of luck to actually get the final bounce or kick or moment to go your way. We've seen a lot of sides who haven't been able to do it.
A little bit of luck there in the grand final last year. You know what I mean? So it went against them in that sense.
Correct, and that's been other cases as well. But of the past 21 completed seasons, they've made the prelim final or the grand final in 10 of them. So that's basically 1 every 2 years. So Geelong's the benchmark there. They're 13 in the same period. Now that, to me, says that this is a side and a club that's been able to have small dips but really keep coming back and in different ways. And even more recently, they've found players for their style and their surrounds as well. Like Pat Lipinski, for me, was a great MCG pick.
Yes.
He's a long and hard runner. He doesn't have the same sort of pace that other players do, and maybe that's what's one of the reasons that was keeping him out of the Bulldogs lineup. But in terms of how they played that ground, he's been perfect for it. Collingwood's like Succession at the moment.
Oh,
They are must watch. The theme song kicks in, and you just sit back and enjoy the ride. Ding, 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 ding. But that's just the part of it that I think maybe goes under the radar a little bit, just how good this club has been over a 2-decade period in challenging. Now, you have to take the next step to win them. I get that.
Yep.
But to be in the mix every couple of years is a side and club that hasn't really dipped down for too long ever throughout that period. I think you're right about the fire sale. Those players haven't come back to bite them at all.
Well, we'll look at the 4. Jaden Stevenson, R2, Basaina Valagi, Tom Phillips and Adam Treloar. So 2 of those 4 aren't on a list anymore. And the other 2, Jaden Stevenson hasn't necessarily been a best 22 player at North Melbourne, who have struggled over the last couple of years, has made a good start to this season under Alistair Clarkson. And Adam Treloar's a good player and was a great player for Collingwood, and he's been a good player for the Western Bulldogs. I don't think Collingwood has missed him, though. And you can get a sense that they've actually improved since he departed. So
no, there's been opportunities afforded to other players as well. Would Josh Dacos have as much time on the wing?
Yes.
If Adam Treloar was still there. Tom Phillips was on the wing there for a couple of years and a really good player there on the wing. Would Josh Dacos have moved into that position as well? Yep. So there's that part of it. Probably the one thing that hurt them in that period was the trading out of their future first-round pick.
Yeah, can you imagine that?
Of course, like, imagine if they'd got...
So recap what happened there.
Finn Callahan and Nick Dacos.
Yeah.
They obviously traded that out in 2020 ahead of time, knowing that it was going to be swallowed up by the Dacos bid for Nick in 2021, but not anticipating they'd finish second last in the lowest ever position the club's finished on a ladder.
Yeah.
So, and that one obviously, they had to manipulate that one through the 2021 period as well. They were able to get enough points to match the Dacos bid, which obviously come a couple of spots later than it should have. But look, just on Dacos, I mean, he has been a gift that has changed the complexion of that footy club and footy team.
Yes.
As has Craig McRae. That was an appointed gift. This one, that was like something that you choose the Christmas present rather than you get gifted and open the box and go, oh, that's really good. But yeah, having him up their sleeve has changed the way they play. And having him up their sleeve as a midfielder, as a half back, he could play half forward if he wanted to. He's the Mahomes of the AFL.
Yep.
Patrick Mahomes. He's Giannis. He's Mbappe. Because all of these players have hit their peak really early in their respective sports. And he's doing that. And he's already, in want of a better term, world-class of the AFL game in his own sport. So, and I mentioned those guys because there is some context to that. Nick, and he's an interesting person and player to follow at the moment because he's red hot and everyone's talking about his Brownlow favourite, one of them, after a couple of best on-ground performances. Those players and sports people were always part of his interests, and he studied them. He studied Giannis's humility after he won the NBA championship a couple of years ago and how he spoke after that and what he meant to people and what he meant for the community. He watched Kevin Durant's work ethic and was enamored by that. He watched documentaries about Cristiano Ronaldo and Lionel Messi, these type of guys. So he's always had a view about taking his talent and making it as best as he can. I think we're starting to see that. We've already seen it across his first 25 or so games. So yeah, there's a lot to like about him, and obviously
he's a good player, isn't he?
He's a fairly good player. But
where did you have him ranked in your draft year? In his draft year?
1. Yep. So the other thing about the Pies, I reckon, that's worth mentioning is they've been brutal and they've been ruthless.
Yeah.
So they have cut 3 draftees after just 2 years on the national list as senior listed players, and often clubs carry players even a year or two longer because they feel a relationship or they're a bit devoted to them having selected them. Collingwood's just been brutal and said, no, we don't think you're going to get there, and that's where it sits at the moment. They've been really good at the mid-season draft. Ash Johnson's played his part there as well. Aidan Begg, I think, is going to have some interest because he's a tall, talented player. Josh Carmichael as well. They've nailed some later picks in Bo McCreary playing his role. Jack Ginnivan, a rookie at the end of 2020.
Brody Mychek was a rookie. And
then, of course, the Grundy decision was a big one to make. That has an effect across the whole club to make that sort of call where, no, we're jettisoning a player because we think that this is going to be better for us in the long term. So through this, and to keep the succession theme running, they've built this relationship capital, right, with the industry. And that's without going too much Logan and Kendall Roy. But
you mentioned Nan Pierce then.
well, it's a little bit like that. But it's a connecting with the marketplace and having an industry view on what you're able to do. So now player agents, other clubs know that the Pies are willing to make stuff happen. They're willing to do stuff that might be brave and other clubs would shy away from.
Yeah.
Because the ultimate goal is to win the flag. And there's not going to be too much getting in the way of that.
Can I just reference one more thing as well?
Succession.
Not a Succession reference, but we mentioned the 4 first-round picks that are still on their list from the last 3 years. I'd say 3 of them at the moment, aside from Nick Dacos, aren't in their best 22, but will be best 22 players for the next 5 to 10 years. So we're not seeing Finlay Macrae on a weekly basis at the moment. Where Reece McGuinness has come on as a sub a couple of times and looked really promising, but he's another player, first-round pick, that's probably going to have an impact on this group in the future. And then, of course, Ed Allen last year, who they love. They re-signed before he'd even played a game, so that's how much trust and faith they've put in him already. He's a one that was potentially talked about as a top 10 pick last year, ended up sliding down to 19, but is a player that might take a couple of years because of his size and because of his athletic attributes. So these are players that they haven't just built for we're going to challenge in 2018, then 2023, and that's the end of our window. Like they're going to have a window now because of these picks that they've brought into the football club and because they've been able to manipulate their list like this, that's going to be open for such a long period of time. The stat that you mentioned before about 10 in 21 years making it to the final 4 of the competition, it shows the value of this strategy. I mean, you look at a club like Carlton at the moment who went in the opposite route and completely bottomed out around 2015, 2016, 2017. They've now gone a decade without finals. It can pass you by. Fremantle went nearly a decade without finals before they made it last year. Like, that strategy, I think, runs a little bit of a risk where it can completely pass you by, whereas this one enables you to be in that window for longer, I think. Yes, there's the element of what Hawthorn's coming towards the end of this strategy, so now they have to. I can understand it from that perspective. Clubs like Fremantle and Carlton weren't really in that mode when they went into full rebuild mode. They just got to the edge a point where they thought we need to completely reshape this list. So that's the value in this type of strategy that Collingwood have done over the best part of 2 decades.
So where do they go next? Because it's going to be interesting. Graham Wright's already spoken about the Pies having some salary cap room to move this time around and this year, and I guess the changing of their salary cap situation over the past couple of years to get on the front foot and be active again. So Jeremy Howe's injury opens up maybe a vulnerability on that group in terms of the key backs and defenders. He's 33 this year. He's signed for next year. And of course, Billy Frampton will come in and play that role in the medium term. But would they throw the hat in the ring for Ben Mackay? A Mackay and more defensive group for the next 5 years is locking in your key pillars in the back line.
With Nathan Murphy playing as a very good third tall.
The other free agent who I think would be the cherry on top for what Collingwood's built is Jade Gresham. He's out of contract, of course, at St Kilda. It will be a restricted free agent. He's going to wait till deeper in the year before focusing on his free agency call. I just feel like his extra layer of speed and class and polish through half-forward midfield, and we're starting to see some of his verve come back into his game after some injury hit years. He's been really good in the opening couple of weeks for the Saints. He's a player that I'd be looking at as well from the Pies and saying, well, you know, can you add and increase this depth and quality from to be your attacking players who go and hit the scoreboard. Collingwood fan as a kid as well.